Hello, my name is Danae Barkey, and I'm an adult patient and the executive director of HD Network America. I'd like to thank you for listening into today's Facebook live chat focused on the Homocystinuria data collection program, the brain and nervous system surveys. We invite those who are listening to our live recording to post your questions and comments in the chat. Before I get started, I have some light housekeeping to do. Let's see if I can get my buttons up here to work. So I'm going to do a quick share screen. All right. And so this is one of the many things here to share. So we wanted to thank everyone who has currently enrolled. We have met our initial goal of enrolling 50 participants. We currently have 52 who are fully enrolled with 19 states. And we currently, oh, that is a duplicate. That's not going to help us. But my other one was we actually also have 9 countries as well. Not sure where my map went. That's a bummer. Oh, well. So thank you to everyone of you who have fully enrolled. So that's who've completed the process of creating an account, finishing the consent, and actually starting the surveys. So thank you. We also wanted to share with you that this month's topic is pretty special. Last month was centered around oral health, and Dr. Chapman was working on that, but also know that the brain and central nervous system stuff is also part of the challenge. So this month's topic is Rare X is doing an Accelerate Rare, which is part of their theme for research in general. So the Accelerate Rare Disease Open Science Data Challenge will bring together researchers and data scientists in collaborative and competitive environment to make the best use of patient-provided data to solve the big unknowns in healthcare. They are asking you to enroll in the RareX platform if you haven't already, and to complete the behavior, brain, and nervous system surveys. If you are just enrolling, you will need to complete the health and development survey first to unlock additional surveys. This challenge is going through February 28th, which is Rare Disease Day. So if you are interested, you can check out their website, rarex.org/Open Science Data Challenge. The other thing that is part of this challenge that is important to note is that they also are asking you to upload your genetics report. So if you have a genetics report, this has a request date of January 15th. And so you go into your dashboard, and in there you will toggle it to, if you have just one child, it will be easy, but if you have multiple, make sure you're on the right child. And then in documents, you can click upload, and you can upload your genetics report. It's pretty easy. And I just wanted to note what an example report is, just because I had some people who asked me if their newborn screening results that just had the like out of range, in range for the amino acids, and that is not a genetics report. So a genetics report provides a little bit more data. So you can have one specific to your condition, which tells you the mutation, which is really what we're trying to hone in on here. And so this was mine. I just removed some of the personal identification information. So you'll see that it has identification, date of birth, your sex, and then the collection date. This didn't come as a surprise to me. I knew I had homocystinuria, but this, for many who are seeking answers, this would be where they first get them. And so, but what I wanted to point out here is it does tell you the gene and then the variant or mutation. And so this is really the data that they're looking for. It could also tell you if you have any benign variants as well. It goes on to have a lot more data that isn't really necessary, but what they're really looking for is in that first 2 pages of the report. If you go through a different company, there might be, and if you are interested in learning more about getting genetic testing, please feel free to reach out to the organization, and we can give you further data for different companies, or you can talk to your genetics clinic. All right, I'm going to stop my screen share here and put it back to our group here of happy faces. And so the last thing I wanted to do is, if you have not enrolled and filled out the oral health survey, if it's in your dashboard, please do so. They have extended the deadline for Dr. Chapman. And so they are going to be doing weekly draws through the month of December to pull that data. So if you have the oral health survey sitting in your dashboard uncompleted, please do so before the end of the month for her to be able to include that in her write-up publication that will be included for the updated guidelines for diagnosis and management. So now on with the show. So all homocystinuria are known to affect the brain and nervous system in various ways. In the guidelines for diagnosis and management of cobalamin-related methylation disorders and severe MTHFR, I do have actually another thing to share if I can get, good old, here we go. I have to apologize. I'm a little bit clunky on Zoom. Okay, so in the guidelines, in table 1 of them, it shows various symptoms and ranks their likelihood by disorders, by the disorder. What you'll notice here is that in these subsets, you have the type of cobalamin disorder and MTHFR, and then it has the symptom along the side. The more pluses, the higher chance and probability. So 4 pluses means that more than 50% of cases, 3 pluses means 25 to 50, and so forth. And so what you can see here, though, is that there is an increased chance for failure to thrive, highly associated with central nervous system issues. You can also see high incidence of seizures, movement disorders, or abnormal tone, which is also known as hyptonia. Otherwise, and I said that backwards, and also development disorders, both physical and cognitive. And so I'm going to stop the share there. So the same goes for classical homocystinuria. In 1985, there was the natural history study conducted by Dr. Harvey Mudd, Fleming Scopfi, Dr. Levy, and others, and that showed to hold true for many of the patients who were not diagnosed or treated at birth with classical HCU. So this study shows the majority of patients to have developmental and cognitive delays, as well as seizures. Now it's gotten definitely better because we have newborn screening across the board for classical homocystinuria, and we have known treatment. However, there are still many patients who are missed, and therefore many still exhibit symptoms. While we are aware of these issues, the literature shares there are still many things left unknown, especially as patients are treated earlier and live longer. We just really don't know what happens as patients age, and we are also just finding out more and more each day as more and more patients are identified. The Brain and Nervous System Survey focuses on 11 different aspects, but today we will be only talking about a few of them due to time and experience. Today, we are sharing our experiences around the areas that are in the survey, which may or may not be tied to homocystinuria. To help us further understand the landscape of patients, we ask you to register with homocystinuria.rare-x.org and take the brain and nervous system surveys. If you have not already completed the behavior survey, we also ask you to do that too. You will need to take the health and development survey first if you have not done that. We cannot reiterate that enough. So we are going to start with introductions. Many people know who I am. I also have a brother with classical homocystinuria. I tell people all the time, he is the reason I was diagnosed. And so when I share today, most of the things that I will share are really his experiences, but they were a big part of our diagnostic odyssey. And so if I could ask Grace for you to go first, can you tell us your child's name, where you're from, when she was diagnosed, the type of homocystinuria, and why participating in the data collection program and research is important to you.
Hi, so I'm Grace. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, Carson. She has homocystinuria due to severe MTHFR deficiency. She was actually diagnosed with a newborn screening. And so so it was when she was a couple weeks old, that's when we got that diagnosis, and within the next month we received the genetic report, which confirmed what we already suspected. So I participate in Rare X. I want the research to, well, for one, to begin. There's no research for severe MTHFR or any that there is. It's very small. So anything that I can do to help, this will help researchers to know what they need to look for and how they can help us. So I want to give as much information as I can so that they can better help us and, help her in the long run.
All right, Heather, would you like to go next?
All right, so my son Cody is 2.5. He has Cobalamin G metabolic disorder, and he was diagnosed at around like 11 months to a year old. And when he was about 10 months old, we took him to the ER, and he had gone septic. They had no clue what was going on. And we're lucky to still have him today. So I think my reasons for wanting to participate in research are very much apparent, because we were on such a thin blade as to whether Cody made it or not. We happened to be at a very prestigious teaching hospital, which is what saved his life.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's the trauma that really motivates us, just because, there's no other way to know that the future is going to change without us helping, take that captaincy. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Sam. I was diagnosed with HCU when I was 2.5. When I was born, there was no newborn screening, so I was missed. I had seizures before being diagnosed. They don't know when they started, but my parents did find me one day when I was having a nap, having a seizure. And then I also had I went backwards in my gross motor skills. So I went from being able to sit up to not being able to sit up. And the doctors didn't think I was gonna make it, honestly. But then now I guess research has come so far that I kind of proved everyone wrong in that sense. So I have classical homocystinuria, and I'm partially B6 responsive.
Okay, And what is your reason for participating in Rare X and in research?
In hopes that from the information that, sorry, I have it written down.
That's okay.
In hopes that from the information given that today will help go towards a better understanding of new information and to go by and to basically go by more research for HCU. I know there was a lot of like basically outdated information that's out there from like the 1980s and 1990s that could be updated.
Yeah, I know. I think that's the problem, is that, you know, we still have a lot of doctors going based upon really old data, especially for classical homocystinuria. We were fortunate to have that study, but a lot has happened between now and then. And so we can't really rely on that data. I mean, it's as old as I am, so it definitely has gotten better, thank goodness, but we definitely need updated, more comprehensive information. So I am going to dive here into some questions. So I feel like I have to apologize because I went for the hardest thing first, but I feel like it's the thing that kind of gets families right out the door when they don't have quite the diagnosis yet. So the first topic that we have here is failure to thrive. So when patients are missed by newborn screening, before many with Cobalamin and MTHFR get their diagnosis of their specific disorder, they are diagnosed with failure to thrive. We have multiple stories on our website of patients who had failure to thrive as a result of not being diagnosed at birth or not getting the diagnosis fast enough, just because every hour counts with some of these disorders. Severe MTHFR and the cobalamin-related remethylation disorders were on that table I showed earlier, and it showed that greater than 25% of patients with the cobalamin disorders will be diagnosed with failure to thrive, which is quite a few of them. Heather, Cody wasn't diagnosed through newborn screening and struggled significantly until your diagnosis, and I know you're still struggling to this day. Can you talk about the things that led up to his diagnosis of failure to thrive?
Yes. So I'm actually backing up quite a bit, and I think one of the reasons Cody was missed was because he was born in May of 2020. And for those who may not know, I think hospitals were fairly distracted at that time. But, you know, I would say that, you know, Cody had a rough journey from the start, but not because of his metabolic disorder. He was born 7 weeks premature. And, you know, he and I both had to be hospitalized due to all of that. But he started to thrive after being released from the NICU. He was in there a month, and we thought everything was hunky-dory until he hit about 5 months old, and he began to slow in his progression and began to regress. And every time I brought it up to our pediatrician, I was told that, oh, well, he was premature, so you can't expect him to be where everyone else is. And I mentioned, hey, he's getting really constipated, and I'm really concerned about it. And I kept being told by the staff at that office, oh, you're such a cute first-time mom. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a nice, completely non-sexist thing to say to me.
It's a great way to gaslight your feelings, though, and your emotions.
Yeah. So it took a while for our pediatrician to even start to take us seriously. Like, he actually was like, maybe your breasts aren't producing as much milk as you think they are, and that's the problem. And, you know, I understand now that he was looking at this objectively as a scientist and not calling me a bad mom for not producing enough milk. But at the time, that's how I took it.
Yeah. Well,
But
I'll tell you, as a mom who was forced to stop breastfeeding because production was low, you feel like you're failing your child regardless. And so
yeah,
society unfortunately has made us feel that way just because we can't do what is expected of us. And so I get that.
well, so basically what happened was, after a ton of, you know, our pediatricians saying, well, maybe you're not doing enough for him, my husband went into the next pediatrician appointment, because at the time only one parent at a time was allowed. And my husband, for better or for worse, this time for better, has all the social graces of an engineer. And he walked out of that doctor's office with referrals to PT and OT, which is physical therapy and occupational therapy. And the occupational therapist essentially saved Cody's life, because, you know, she told me, look, if he gets to this certain point where he has stopped eating and stopped peeing, you need to take him to the ER. And, you know, there was one day that came and Cody had just stopped. He had given up, and he wasn't diagnosed with failure to thrive until we were in the ER that day. You know, we kept being told, oh, he's premature. Oh, you're not feeding him enough. Oh, this, oh, that. And, you know, we got a very big apology from his pediatrician after, and his pediatrician is now a powerful advocate for him. Yes. And so that's one thing I'll say is, you know, go more off of judgment and politics than emotion when it comes to whether or not you're going to immediately fire a doctor, but don't be afraid to do that either.
Yeah.
That's not the question you asked, but no, he wasn't diagnosed until we were in the ER, and, you know, this tiny baby had the biggest room in the pediatrics ER, and constantly had 5 doctors in the room all looking at him at the same time, not nurses, not fellows, 5 attending doctors. And I started to realize after the fact that just showed how dire it was, and we are lucky to still have him.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, but I'm so glad that the doctors at the ER, you know, took it seriously, because, you know, we hear many stories of, you know, the ER being worse than the pediatrician. So it's great that, you know, they recognize the dire aspect of the situation and, you know, moved quickly to help, you know, kind of get things more stabilized for him, and start to get you connected. We're going to go back and dive further into this here in a little bit. Grace, I wanted to come back to you here really quick. I know you had said that Carson was never given like a full diagnosis of failure to thrive. But I know a lot happened in those 3 weeks between when she was born and then when she was diagnosed. And so you had noted that she just really didn't gain any weight. And so can you talk about what you had observed before her diagnosis?
Yeah, so the Carson's first 3 weeks, a lot happened within those 3 weeks. we had 2 abnormal newborn screenings, then blood work that confirmed she had homocystinuria within those first 3. And so I noticed that Carson wasn't gaining weight, and I kept bringing it up with the pediatrician, concerned that she wasn't gaining anything. She wasn't really losing, except for that initial. She was 7 pounds 13 ounces when she was born, and then she dropped to 7 pounds, and she stayed at that weight for 3 weeks. And I remember going to it was my oldest daughter's well visit about when Carson was 2 weeks old. And I was in there. I said, look, she's not gaining any weight. And I kind of felt like they just kind of brushed it off. Like they weren't really concerned that she wasn't gaining weight. I don't know if it's because we knew that this diagnosis was also out there and they were more concerned with that, which you would think they would be more focused that she wasn't. But I personally just remember being concerned that they weren't taking that seriously. We even at home bought a scale to weigh Carson at home because, at 7 pounds and normal scales, so we had to buy a little bowl and everything, and we would weigh her every single day to see if there was any difference. So she didn't gain any within those 3 weeks, and I personally think that if she was not diagnosed with that newborn screening, she was on her way to failure to thrive. I think that's what, since we were able to intervene early enough, because I recently looked at pictures before she started treatment and after, like a week before and a week after, completely different baby. Before I didn't notice at the time, but she almost had like this lifeless, not focused type of demeanor. And then a week after, after she started betaine, she was like this lively, I say lively, but as lively as a 1-month-old would be.
Yeah.
So yes, I said the first 3 weeks she didn't gain any weight. Within 1 week of being on betaine, she gained over 1 pound. Just on 1 week.
You think about 1 pound not being a lot, but when you're only 7 pounds to begin with, 1 pound is a lot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a ton. So that's incredibly impressive.
Mm-hmm. I remember having her weighed and just being so overwhelmed that, like, look, she finally put on some weight, because any little ounce we were happy about if she gained it, but it was no consistent gain until she started betaine, and there was over 1 pound within a week. We were thrilled with that.
Incredible. So for parents, I'm sure these experiences were just like so nerve-wracking and traumatizing. Just having a child anyways induces a lot of anxiety. At least it did for me. So I'm assuming that's pretty typical. And so I can't imagine having all these additional issues. And so what advice would you give to new parents, that might have that might suspect their child isn't thriving the way they're supposed to?
I would say always trust your gut. If you think something's wrong, push for that. Advocate for your child, because like Cody's mom said, a lot of times they may put it on something else. Oh, newborns typically lose weight in the beginning, or you're not producing enough milk, things like that. But we kind of know when something's not right, something seems off. So I always push, if something seems wrong, question it. Don't give up. Keep questioning it over and over until you get the answers that make sense, that can help your child.
Do you have any advice, Heather?
I just completely agree with all of that, you need to fight for it. And, you know, the extra bit of advice I add is, if you're not getting answers, going to a prestigious teaching hospital may help, because when you get to the right type of ivory tower doctors, they do not want to embarrass themselves in front of their students. They do not mind saying, I do not know what's going on, but I will find out. But they're not going to say, well, we don't know what this is, so we're just going to walk away, because they're too proud to look like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that is actually, like, if we hadn't gone to this teaching hospital, I don't know if we'd still have Cody.
Yeah. I think also the other thing is, typically teaching hospitals have a lot more resources at their fingertips. They're usually just have so much more, and because they're teaching hospitals, they're forced to be a lot more on top of information and technology, where, you know, more local hospitals, they don't have all the bells and whistles, and their doctors typically aren't as up to date. If they are, that's phenomenal, but it's just typically not the case. We're going to dive into the developmental disorders that are associated with some of the brain and nervous system stuff here. So developmental delays are very common in homocystinuria, but typically come with many underlying diagnoses. When I share my story, I always tell people that my story isn't my story. It's also my younger brother's. He's much bigger than I am now, but he is 5 years younger than me. But I wouldn't have my diagnosis without him. Garrett was very low tone when he was born. He didn't sit up on time. He didn't crawl, walk, talk. Nothing ever came on time for him. So he didn't start sitting up. It was significantly later, but walking, I remember, being much bigger milestone, being that I still was young myself. But he was about 18 months when he finally started crawling, and he was 3 when he started walking, and he didn't talk till he was 4. We debate if that's the homocystinuria or the vision issues. There's so much we just don't know, but he just didn't have very good muscle tone at all. And the doctor just, it was like, we got the old boys develop slower thing. And it makes me irate to this day that, you know, we still hear patients that are told those things. And it's like, you know what, that's a sad excuse. At least give them a referral to therapies that are going to help them, you know, hopefully accelerate from this really behind trajectory. And so we are thankful that, you know, shortly after his talking came, then the lenses dislocation, which is a different Facebook live chat. So associated with this, in this part of the survey, we have hyptonia, which is low muscle tone or floppy. And then we have hypertonia, which is kind of the opposite end, but you can have both at the same time. And that is the one where you have tight muscles and spasticity and increased muscle tone. So they may seem like opposite ends of the spectrum, but they really aren't. They just have different presentation. And then I also grouped in here cerebral palsy, just because it makes sense when you look at the list of symptoms and how they play into those two areas. So Heather, you had noted that Cody was very low tone. And you also noted that he had hypertonia, and I realized in my notes I sent to you that I had that spelled wrong. I apologize. You referred to him as a flop noodle. When he went to his well child visit, did his pediatrician ever say anything regarding the low tone?
So I don't know if Cody just didn't have the low tone before the sepsis, or if it was just like not as noticeable. So he wasn't a full flop noodle until after he got visibly sick.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, again, we were just told, oh, yeah, he's premature. He'll catch up eventually. And, you know, hashtag gaslighting, yay. But, you know, his diagnosis being low tone when we were in the hospital. He was kind of in a coma for about a week. I don't think it was a full coma. And these are my words, not a doctor's words, but he was almost entirely non-responsive for a whole week.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, after he woke up from that, we noticed that he really couldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I was bringing home, you know, when he was 13 months old, it was like I was bringing home a newborn again. I had to start all over, is what it felt like. And it was overwhelming, but, you know, I was able to manage it. And I'm wondering if Cody's low tone is part of how they got the Cobalamin diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
By looking at that might actually have been one of the factors.
Yeah.
But I don't remember every single detail of that time because I think my brain blocked out a lot of the details.
It makes sense. I feel like what we need is like a whole, because trauma rewires your brain and it protects you. And so some of the things that we just kind of blur or just move out of the way just because we have to be able to survive, especially in the moment, when there's so much going on. And then you have this baby to come and take home and take care of. So you really don't have time to focus on, you know, the what ifs and the what is, you know, we have to be here in the present. So I know it makes it more difficult to kind of spread that out. But you said then that he also has I can't get the word out.
Spasticity.
Thank you. And so did he present with the low tone and that at the same time, or did one come after the other?
So the low tone was like during and after his initial 2-month hospital stay. Part of the reason that his low tone was so bad to the point where he couldn't put himself into a seated position on his own was because, and I know we'll talk about this later in the live, but when he started having seizures, the only thing that worked for him to get them to stop was phenobarbital, which is a barbiturate, and so it will relax all your muscles. So he didn't have the spasticity at that time because he couldn't move.
Yeah.
And you know, the phenobarbital was not helping, and it took a long time to get to the point where the doctors were okay with taking him off of it. And you know, that's a huge part of the advocating I have to do, is picking a medication and saying, do we need this? Like, is this going to be a forever long-term thing? And do the benefits really outweigh the side effects? And, you know, that's a huge part of the advocating I do for him. But the spasticity, that was diagnosed recently by a physiatrist, also known as a rehab specialist.
Okay.
And they were looking at him and they told me, yeah, he has spasticity in his legs, meaning the muscle there is really high tone. And this was very recently. And this doctor was smiling while talking about the potential complications that this could cause. And I'm like, why are you smiling? And the physiatrist said, I'm smiling because this should get you into better therapies.
Mhm.
You know, to the fact that they were able to diagnose him with that.
Yeah.
But he might still have some of the low tone, but it is getting better, especially since we got him off of phenobarbital.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard to know, you know, especially when there's so little, and, you know, if their speech is limited, you know, how much of it is certain things. And they're not, I mean, they're not going to go say, oh, it's my medicine, mom. Like, anyways, like there's so many things, even as adults, we don't. And so it's really hard sometimes to know, is it a complication of the condition? Is it a complication of the medicine? Or is it just something completely else? And so I feel like we spend a lot of time playing that game as patients and caregivers of, is this HCU? Is this not HCU? Is this medication related? Is this not medication related? We play this game a lot. Sometimes we get an answer and sometimes we don't. And it still leaves us trying to find a way to cope and work through. And so you also mentioned that he has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. I apologize. I have can't get words out tonight. And so I was looking through some of the symptoms, and, you know, it's interesting to me because so many of them are symptoms anyways that we had on that cobalamin list. And so do they think that that could be a complication of the Cobalamin G diagnosis, or do they think it's separate? Or is it?
Okay, there's a reason I'm laughing.
Yeah.
And that's because it was because of the Cobalamin G that the physiatrist actually didn't initially want to diagnose Cody with cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're like, well, the thing is, like, the thing that caused the problems with the muscles and the brain, which constitutes cerebral palsy, was Cody going septic. Basically, his body poisoned himself and, you know, did a hard reset on his brain. He had to basically start year one all over again, all that fun stuff. And, you know, the doctor I was talking to was like, yeah, you know, I don't know about diagnosing him with cerebral palsy because this could happen again if you don't stay on top of treating his condition. And, you know, when I was told that, I was like, okay, I'm trying really hard not to be offended at what you just said, because I work my tushy off. I'm surprised I can even sit anymore because I work my tushy off to stay on top of all of Cody's stuff.
Yeah.
And what I said to them was, so what makes this different from someone who is a type 1 diabetic, you know, so is born with an underlying health condition? What makes it different from that? And that doctor sat there and did the best impression of the thinker I've ever seen, you know, the thinker with clothes on.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, sat there like that for a good 5 minutes and then finally said, I've never had to think about this before. And I was like, well, you know, I'm sorry if I'm being difficult, because you have to say things like that in order to keep the calm demeanor that will make people work with you. I actually knew full well that I was being difficult. But the reason why is because there's a lot of treatment that Cody can get, and it is the same exact treatment, whether it's Cobalamin G or cerebral palsy, because the type of treatments involve those exact same symptoms, but it's hard to get it with Cobalamin G because you're not on the magical word list. Yeah. And cerebral palsy is. Yeah. So they are not two different things. It is a tomato and a tomato. Yeah. And you've got to work with people from both states who insist that it is tomato and not tomato, or that it is tomato and not tomato. Yeah. And, you know, when it comes to getting help from developmental centers and things like that, which we desperately need, he needed to have the cerebral palsy diagnosis, and it suddenly makes access to care easier for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, because I think that was the ultimate thing of, this isn't going to impact his CBLG care if he gets the Cobalamin, or if he gets the cerebral palsy diagnosis. And
Right.
it will make his care better if he does.
Yeah. I think that is seen so many times, like, you know, because there's so many comorbidities that can be associated. And, you know, sometimes those comorbidities get better recognition and access, like you were saying, than the actual diagnosis itself, the main diagnosis that's causing all these other things. And so I know it's really frustrating because so many parents, they're trying to get ahead of things before. It's like, well, you're going to wait till I have this diagnosis for me to access those things. Why can't we just access those now rather than waiting for, you know, the shoe to drop? And it's really unfortunate that that's the way the healthcare system is so designed. And it shouldn't be that way, because the truth is that your doctor's recommending the therapies, you need them. And if we could just get insurance companies to realize, like, that should be enough. Like, they're not just adding therapies to add therapies, they're adding therapies so patients can be successful. We're going to move on to our next section here, just because we have a lot to accomplish and get through here. I could keep going, though, definitely. So the next area is coordination issues. And so coordination seems to also be another area for homocystinuria patients that they struggle with. Some of this may be due to the vision impairment that I talked about earlier, but some of it might go much, much deeper and deals with effects of the brain, especially in the homocysteinurias, because we have patients who have strokes before and seizures before they get a diagnosis, which definitely has long-term effects on the brain as well. So Grace, when we were talking in preparation for this, can you talk to us about Carson and her fine and gross motor skills and the impact that has had on her ability to communicate and speak?
Yeah, so what I first noticed, Carson was maybe about a year old, and I noticed she wasn't clapping. She had, you know, it was a really hard time figuring out how to clap. And then after that, I noticed she had a hard time figuring out how to wave. You know, I vividly remember holding her and waving, and she's looking at my hand like, how are you doing that? How can you move your hand like that to wave? Like, just the look on her face, I could tell that's, you know, what she was thinking. And it was, she finally started waving and clapping well beyond, you know, the typical age kids do that. Anyway, Carson started speech therapy at the beginning of this year. And I mentioned that to the speech therapist, how she couldn't quite figure out how to wave. And at that point, she was like, I wonder if Carson has apraxia. You know, kind of getting ahead of myself. So she has a speech delay. She only says a couple of words, not very much at this point at 2.5 years old. So we've been in speech therapy since she was about 1.5 years. And so when I mentioned that, she said, that sounds like it could be apraxia. And so what that is, all the words are in her head. She knows what she wants to say. I could tell she understood us. If we ask her to do something, she can do it. It's there. She's smart. But she has trouble getting it out. So it's like there's a disconnect from the signal from her brain to the muscles in her mouth. And so even whenever I talk and I try to say certain things, I see her looking into my mouth, you know, trying to figure out how I'm moving it so that she can say those same words. And so that's what we've noticed. And on top of that, different time. Like if I tell her to point to her nose, she's got that. But then if I mixed it up and I say, hey, point to your ear, you know, she might start here and then slowly work her way. It's like this disconnect. Like she knows what she wants to do, but she can't quite get that coordination. And so that's what it started out with, that delay with clapping. And so now we're still working on that apraxia. We do not have an official diagnosis yet. It's still suspected because they do not, her specific facility, they do not diagnose that until around 3 years old, and that's not till next summer. But from what I've read and talked to other people with apraxia, it's definitely seeming like it, where she from her brain cannot figure out how to move her mouth to form the words.
That makes sense. Sorry, I had a notification, so I was muting my computer, so no more. And apraxia is one of those things that does pop up in the list for the Cobalamin disorders and MTHFR. Obviously, we don't have as much data on MTHFR as we do on the Cobalamin disorders, but the isolated Cobalamin disorders, we definitely see a lot more apraxia. And so it's just interesting to me because the isolated Cobalamin disorders like Cobalamin G and Cobalamin E, they kind of sit closer to the same group as severe MTHFR. So this is, again, why looking at that broader data for rare X and the homocystinuria, I think is so important because it gives us a larger scope to work with and try to understand the connections.
I've also noticed like this is playing into learning signs. We've tried a couple of different things, but it seems like signs, it's what works the best. But when she'll learn a new sign, that's like her go-to. She'll keep doing that sign. And she might do that sign to mean different things. Like, you know, she was waving. Now, you know, we're wanting to potty train. So I'm trying to get my hand in the camera. So this is, gosh, there it is. This is potty. And so as we're trying to teach her potty now to wave, she's doing that. Where's my hand? We're still doing that same motion for waving. So there's kind of like a confusion whenever we learn new signs. She'll start using that for other things. And yeah, she has her own unique signs that thankfully her daycare has picked up on.
That's awesome though.
But
that's
yeah, so
so in tune because there are many that are not. So it's great that they're paying attention to her unique ways of communicating. I wanted to jump over to Heather here and then to Sam. Heather, how does Cody's difficulty with coordination differ from Carson? And did the doctors relay it back to any of his other diagnoses, or are they saying it's Cobalamin G, or not really saying anything just because, you know, does it really matter if the therapy is and what's working is working?
So it's really more the therapists we're working with through an organization that's sometimes known as Early Start, sometimes known as Regional Center. It's the therapists who are noticing the coordination issues. We haven't really so much discussed them with the doctors and stuff. Probably because for Cody, it was less about developmental delays and more about, OMG, we almost lost this little child, and now we're making sure that he's going to stay alive. So probably a different focus there, but yeah, a lot of the therapists noticed it, but they've had a hard time. And these are people who have done this for years. They have a hard time when Cody can't even do the starting exercise for whatever it is. He's gotten better, but like we had an infant development specialist who's like, give him a towel and I want to see him pull it. And we're like, he can't even grasp it with both hands, let alone do that motion.
Yeah.
And, you know, my sister, who has a deaf child, talked about sign language all the time. And we're like, he can't control his arm movements. And, he can now do a couple of signs now that he has gotten more control. A lot of stuff has been going in the right direction for him, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, I guess the ways it differs is we have a very different focus just due to all of the complications Cody collected.
The
Yeah.
global effect.
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely makes it hard when, you have to back up so far that, like you have to, the baby steps, you need the baby steps to the baby steps. It definitely complicates things that much further. Sam, you mentioned that your coordination issues were more on the clumsiness side that is associated with coordination. And what has your experience been like, and how has it impacted your life? And have you been able to find ways to minimize them?
Yeah, so I have had a lot of clumsiness in my life growing up. So, I mean, there's two different ways I could talk about it, and it might relate into the coordination thing. So, one was when I was younger. So before they knew I needed glasses, I couldn't see at all, but no one knew that. So I honestly, I would stand, but I wouldn't take a step because I had no depth perception. I couldn't see. This was maybe before I was diagnosed. So like, or maybe I was diagnosed, but I don't know why I didn't have glasses on, but like, cause would have been two, but anyways, I didn't have glasses on, and because I was looking back at all these home videos, I'm like, where's my glasses? Like, was I even diagnosed yet? And you could see I was scared to walk, like, and I would be walking only by hanging on to things.
Yeah. That also, just knowing what 2-year-olds are like, if you had glasses, you just might have been the child who would not keep them on your face, because I know Garrett had glasses, I think, at that point, and it just was impossible. It was so hard to keep them on. So, you might have had them and just, your parents were like, this isn't working. Trying to keep like a hat on a 2-year-old is hard. I can't imagine trying to keep glasses on them.
Yeah. And then like when I like got like older, so like in the elementary grades and stuff like that, like even if I was standing, like all of a sudden my knees would give out. It's like, okay, like that's random. Like why did my knees just give out? I have no idea, but I know I had like a low muscle tone issue too.
Mm-hmm.
And then like throughout the years, like with the vision, because my vision has gotten worse, and I had to get my double vision corrected because of another surgery I had when I was younger. So when I had double vision, I would be walking into doors and not actually knowing I walked into a door till I walked into a door or wall.
Yeah.
I was seeing two of them, which is not a great experience, by the way.
Yeah. And if I recall, with your double vision issues, they couldn't really find the root cause of it. And you struggled to, I mean, I know you were struggling for quite a long time with it, even after having surgeries. Do you still experience that same double vision?
So now I'm not wearing a prism at all. So I mean, it works for me better now with the prism. I didn't know it then, but now after they did the surgery and then a prism was put back on by my eye doctor in town, it actually made it worse. But I didn't know that at the time. So when they took it off, yes, it was worse, but then it got better slowly. I had to like retrain my brain. So like 24, 25-year-old me is trying to like retrain my brain on how to think to look single vision. It's like, I don't know how you do that, but I'm gonna try.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, because, your eyes are, I mean, you don't think about the brain aspect of your eyes, but your brain controls your whole body. So trying to get it to focus into one cohesive picture versus two, that definitely makes it much harder to navigate the world. In general, bad vision makes it really hard. So I think we're going to move on here to seizures, epilepsy, and Parkinsonism. I can't pronounce half.
Parkinsonianism.
Thank you. I'm glad someone can pronounce some of these words. And so, Grace, I know we've talked extensively, and you've shown me some of the videos that you have from when Carson was little, about the abnormal eye movements and, you know, seizure. Can you talk about what you were observing and if there were any triggers that were associated with and what the doctors were saying in response to your observations?
Yeah, so there was 2 different time periods that this happened, and they both were a little different. So the first one was those first 3 weeks again. So it was right around 3 weeks when Carson, she had actually already started betaine, so she was on that for a couple of days, and she was a little bit more alert. Before then, it was constant sleeping. And I thought she was this great baby who was sleeping. Turned out it was HCU. But anyway, so she started to be more alert, and I remember sitting on the couch holding her, and she was trying to look at me, and she couldn't. Her eyes just rolled up. Every time she would try to look at me, they rolled up. She couldn't focus. So I took a video, sent it to her her specialist, and they asked the doctor. They said, this could be signs of a seizure. You know, either get her to the pediatrician or the emergency room. Of course, it's a Friday, and pediatrician's office was about to close. So I take her to the emergency room, and as I'm about to grab her to go to the emergency room, I see her, she had this very odd squeal that I had never heard before. And to me, I immediately thought, that looks and sounds like a seizure. I didn't know exactly. Yeah, I know they all look different, but it was so abnormal for her. So I get to the emergency room, and I'm talking to the doctor. And while I'm talking to her, Carson does the same thing. And she's like, I think you're right. I think that could be a seizure. So her specialist, they're 4 hours away. It took hours. You know, I got to the emergency room probably around 1 p.m. They wanted to fly us to her team 4 hours away. We didn't get there till after midnight. Finally hooked up to the EEG by the next morning. But by that time, all the EEGs came out normal. And we stayed the weekend. That was the first time I remember holding her, and she could look at me. I remember feeling so overwhelmed that she actually looked at me, and she could focus. They didn't say too much on that part. You know, that was kind of the end of that. She stayed on Keppra for 6 months. You know, kept in contact with the neurologist, but they said, we don't know. Maybe the betaine's kicking in more. You know, maybe she's fine for now. So now fast forward, this past February, when Carson was about 1.5 years old, she was sick. She had strep throat. Of course, I had taken her to the doctor a couple times. They didn't catch it the first time. And so it was about a week, she had a fever, and she wasn't eating or drinking like she normally should. And she just slept the whole time. And it was late one night, it was bath time, and we noticed her eyes would dart to the left. And it was like this quick little dart, but they kind of rolled to the left. And she kept doing that. And so again, you know, I started messaging her doctors. I think I even messaged you today because I was freaking out, like, what is this? It's more of this eye movement. Is it seizures coming back because some type of metabolic crisis? I don't know. And I remember that I was messaging the neurologist for a week, didn't hear anything back, finally called. But anyway, we went down there, we did a EEG, just like an hour EEG, came back normal. and they decided to do it like an overnight EEG. That one came back normal too, but she's still doing this. But we noticed it happened when she was sick. When she was sick and tired, that's when we noticed these eye movements. And for about a week, it was really bad. Then it got a little bit better. Then when she's tired, I was able to record it. I kind of suspected it was happening. So finally, it was, a few months later, maybe about 4 or 5 months later, we see the ophthalmologist, and I'm telling her about it, and she's like, I think it might be paroxysmal tonic upgaze, which apparently is something benign kids grow out of in their toddler years. I think right after that, I saw the neurologist, so I showed him the paperwork. He was like, yeah, I think that could be it. And they have yet to give me any answers, really. But I don't know what this eye movements are, and I only notice it when she's sick or not doing well. But that's the best explanation they've given me for that. But so far, every EEG's come out normal. I've joined a Facebook group for the tonic upgaze, and a lot of those kids have normal EEGs. And I've seen videos, and it looks just like that. So it's very strange, but my gut feeling, it's something more than what they were making it seem to be. And hopefully she's past that. I'm not sure. Has been for a few months now, although tonight I'm giving her a medicine. I see that, I'm thinking, oh, that's giving me flashbacks. So I always worry when she's getting sick if that's going to cause something. There's one of those strange things.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary having your kid sick, but then the homocystinuria, like I know for myself, like anytime I'm sick, I get really anxious about it, just because you don't know how quick things are going to spiral, or what it's going to turn into. And so and if you've had that history with having to go to the hospital, it amplifies the anxiety, that
especially this lack of answers. And that was traumatic at 3 weeks old, flying. It was just me and her flying, traveling there together, and still not to have many answers to it. And I almost felt like they weren't too concerned. They're like, oh, well, whatever it is, it's not causing any harm. And I'm like, I want answers. This isn't normal. She shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I hate that statement. It's like, only time will tell. Well, it's like, well, thanks. But, in the meantime, you're still anxious, because it's like, well, is it going to happen again? And if it does, is it something more severe, or is it just, one more incident before it stops?
And you want to get ahead of it. You want to prevent those things, not react to whatever's happening.
Yeah. I'd like to jump over to Heather here really quick here. I know, Heather, you've also been through a lot with Cody, and you had noted that he had tremors and infantile spasms and seizures. So they kind of just build on each other there. To many, that might sound like they are the same thing, but can you talk to us about how each of those looked, and were there any triggers that you think offset them, and has he outgrown them, and have you found treatment that helps or lessens them?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you realize the can of worms that whole question was, but
I know.
No,
well, especially after the week you've had. So
this is a big thing, and it was the start of one of my first really advocating for my son arguments that got to play with. So I mentioned earlier that he had kind of had something that I'm comparing to a coma, where he was non-responsive for a week.
Mhm.
And when I say non-responsive, like only the things he was the most passionate about could get him to open his eyes the teeniest amount, only for a fraction of a second. And, you know, except for those things, you'd think that there's no lights on inside, no one home.
Mhm.
And so when he woke up after the initial full 24 hours of him screaming at everyone the entire time, because he's like, I'm still here, all of you. After that, his arm started shaking. And, you know, it started shaking and didn't stop. And of course, you know, I'm an accountant, or I was an accountant. Now I am a full-time caregiver, but, you know, I'm trained in accounting. I have no idea that this isn't a seizure, it's a tremor. And it is called a Parkinsonian tremor. And, you know, it's the brain not routing signals to the muscles correctly, so the muscle just shakes and shakes and shakes and never stops. Or if it does, it takes a long time for it to do so, and there isn't necessarily rhyme or reason to it. The brain is misfiring. And so, you know, it's like, are you sure this isn't a seizure? And they're like, no, this isn't, because it's not stopping. You know, and it's just the arm. And then it moved to one of his legs, and then the other arm, and then the last leg. And so he was just sitting there with everything shaking nonstop. And they finally came to me and they're like, okay, we have to put him on propranolol, because if we don't stop all this shaking, it's going to make all of his muscles waste away, like all the muscles in his arms and legs. And so they put him on that, and it stopped it. So the trigger for the Parkinsonian tremors was his brain restarting, but it wasn't wired correctly when the restart happened. And he eventually did grow out of it with treatment, but we had to have him on propranolol for about 8 months. And it took a few months before the tremors all the way stopped and wouldn't break through.
Mhm.
And after that point, I was like, you know, hey, now can we finally start getting him off of this? Because one of the horrifying side effects of the propranolol is it can make your heart rate and blood pressure fall through the floor. And in a medically fragile baby, that's really not a fun game to play. And this is something that's slightly humorous now, but we had multiple ER trips where we took him to the ER because of, what's that called? Lethargy. You know, lethargy is a huge red flag as far as at least cobalamin, and I believe homocystinuria as well. If you're experiencing lethargy, it could be that your levels are completely out of whack and you need to get to the ER right away to have it checked. And so we kept going to the ER, and they're like, okay, why does he keep getting lethargic? We can tell he's lethargic, but we don't know why. And me being one of the naughty parents, you know, they tell you, don't look at the monitors, you know, let us look at the monitors. But numbers calm me down because I'm that type of accounting nerd. And I said, his heart rate and blood pressure are low. And I said, no, they're within normal range. I'm like, no, you don't understand, they're low. And I made the joke. well, I'm not trained medically. I'm just an accountant. And they're like, wait a second, you're an accountant and you say this number is off from what you've seen in the patterns. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, later when my brain caught up with everything, I was like, isn't there a medicine of his that makes those low? So we had to manage, making sure the propranolol was at the right level and discerning whether or not lethargy was due to, oops, too much propranolol for what he was going through at the moment.
Well, and you think that they would have looked at that a little bit more closely, just because it's not going to be a consistent thing, like all the time, like the level of medication. I have two siblings with epilepsy who don't have homocystinuria, and just knowing how often they have to go in and, get lab work to adjust the medication, because too much can have effects and too little obviously can have effects. And so you always want to be, that's why we all go to the doctor when we have medical conditions, is so that way we can have the right dose of any medication, because, our bodies change. The metabolic state is not one, single plateau. It would make life so much easier if it was. But I'm sure that I can see why now that was not a very easy question.
Well, and so like to continue through to the end of it, you're like, how is it different from seizures, and how are infantile spasms different from seizures? After he went through the whole thing with the tremors, he started to have seizures, and the doctors didn't believe me until I showed them a video of it. And that's when he went on the phenobarbital. And those seizures were probably also from his brain turning off and back on again. But now, just due to Cody's whole journey, he will get what are called febrile seizures, where high body temps can lower his threshold and make him have a seizure. So he's actually not on an anticonvulsant for those seizures, because those are what are called provoked seizures. So provoked seizures are, if you fall and hit your head and you're having a seizure, or if you have a high fever and you have a seizure, and there's several other causes, but those are the two categories where Cody's provoked seizures have fallen in.
Mm-hmm.
And, unprovoked is, well, something's not quite right in your brain, and, these just happen. And that's actually, infantile spasms are a part or are a subset of epilepsy, and they're usually for a person under a year old. Cody's a little old to have them, and he may have grown out of them. And so he is on a specific anticonvulsant for the infantile spasms, but those are a lot more subtle, like subtle movements. Like for him, it was, or his eyes flickering, like anyone who's worried about eye flickering and it doesn't quite look right, discuss infantile spasms with your neurologist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just to, and I could probably talk about this subject alone for hours, but that's just the thing there. So for Cody specifically, he no longer has tremors. He has only, for the main category of seizures, they're only fever seizures. And then for his epilepsy, it's, hey, you've got infantile spasms, which we're hoping in February to say he no longer has those. And I'll cover the abnormal EEG at this point. They can measure background information of the brain of, hey, there has been this type of brain static in the area. And even though we're not witnessing a seizure, we're seeing that ones have happened. And they can see that on some EEGs, which has been hugely helpful for Cody.
Mhm.
Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
No, I think that was a great, I know we're way behind schedule, and I hope you guys are okay. If you need to hop off, I completely understand here. This is just, this could have been probably broken down into like 3 parts at this, like there's just, it's a complicated topic. Sam, I know you had mentioned that when you were little, you had seizures. Once you were diagnosed with homocystinuria, did those stop, or did they just stop on their own? And have you had any later after your diagnosis?
So from what I've read, and what my mom has told me and my grandma, I only had seizures like before I was diagnosed, and then shortly when I wasn't diagnosed yet. But they gave me, I don't even know what it was called. Like my grandma was trying to think of the name, but she couldn't remember what the name was. But there was a medication that they gave me, and it like pretty much stopped the seizures from happening.
Okay. So you didn't have them after that then?
No.
Okay.
So far been seizure free.
Well, let's hope it stays that way. I think everyone who's, I mean, if you've witnessed a seizure or have had one, you never want to see someone or have one again. They're terrifying and very.
I mean, I've definitely witnessed a seizure because we did have a child that I worked with that had cerebral palsy, and she had them like literally every day, whether they were noticeable or not, and it was horrible.
Yeah, it's scary. And I'm sure for her parents too, or his, it's terrifying for them to go through. We're going to move into here. We're just about wrapping it up here. The cognitive impairment part, and this area is probably one of the very well documented areas across all the homocystinuria. And so there's seems to be a larger spectrum when it comes to classical homocystinuria, but with the cobalamins and severe MTHFR, just because we are not as further into understanding the diagnostic odyssey of patients, and treatments are just finally starting to really be looked at and observed, you definitely see more cognitive impacts. I know, Heather, you had mentioned regression. When did you initially, and I know you mentioned this, but can you remind me of when you saw the regression, and has he been able to make up for any of it?
So, and at the time, I was just trying to live my life, didn't realize anything was different about Cody. He just, suddenly stopped doing some things he used to do. Like, he actually started talking at 3 months old, which most people don't believe us about. But he would have a word he'd use to ask for food. And instead of screaming at us in the middle of the night, he'd say, like, I want food. Well, not, and it was a single word, but that's still developmentally classified as speech.
Yeah.
And, he learned names of a few colors at 5 months old. And then at 7 months, he stopped army crawling, stopped talking entirely, or almost entirely. He just started laying very still. And I didn't understand what was going on. And it just kept getting worse and worse for the next 3 months until he ended up in the, he stopped laughing, all these things. And I didn't realize that the magical word there was regression. And that if I had said that word, maybe his pediatrician and pediatrician's team would have listened to me faster.
Mm-hmm.
But, I But honestly, I thought I was just being a bad mom. Like, oh, did I accidentally let him watch too much TV? You know, the standard things of you're a bad parent if, but no, Cody, there's still some things that he could do at 7 months old, or like 5 months old, that he can't do now. He's getting better, like he's gaining back his ability to grasp stuff. And now he's trying to figure out more and more ways to become a nuisance, and we're sitting there celebrating.
Yeah.
My mom makes fun of me for having collectibles, and she's like, Heather, one of these days your son is going to get into your collectibles and break them all. And I'm like, and I will cry tears of joy because it'll mean that he could do it.
Yeah.
I
think that's the thing is, like, you know, all those things that, like, as typically parents are upset about, those are the things we end up rejoicing about, because, you know, the things that we think may never happen, and they do. And it's, you know, you learn to have a different appreciation for the things in life, because there's so much that we just take for granted, that we don't even realize. But do you think a lot of it's due to the additional therapies he's had, that he's been able to gain so much back?
Yes. And, you know, the therapies have helped a ton, but also Cody has decided that he wants to. And, you know, it's like Sam talking about her daughter wanting to see how waving works, wanting to see how the mouth works. Cody is also very analytical in that way. And, you know, sometimes I have to push him to do something, and you really have to sometimes start with the smallest movement you can break it down into. Like, I got tired of having to constantly hurt my back and arms and wrists with bearing all of Cody's weight. And so I decided, okay, you know what? The movement I'm going to teach him is how to put weight on his elbow from lying on his back and then pushing with his hand. And the tough love I'd give him in that circumstance was, if he was reaching for me to pick him up, I would do it only if he helped a little. And sometimes I'd lift him up 2 inches and I'd be like, what do you do with that elbow? And he'd look right back at me like, what you gonna do? And I'd set him down and I'd say, you know, that's what. He no longer has that problem. He can now bum scoot. He can put himself into a sit. He can crawl a little. But I would say a lot of it started with that, because, you know, I got frustrated and I was like, okay, I need to think of a thing that he can do. I need to start from there, because one thing Cody sometimes will encounter is a little bit of hopelessness, a little bit of, I can't do anything. And showing him that he can have some power over his world.
Yeah.
Is huge. And, you know, that's going to look different for every child.
Yeah.
Give them something that brings joy into their life. Like, that's actually one reason why we let Cody watch a whole bunch of TV at a year-old, because he had the muscle control of a newborn and couldn't really interact with his world the way his 1-year-old brain wanted to.
Yeah.
But that was something that made him happy to be alive, and so he tried.
Yeah. I think that's the thing we have to remember in general, those of us who have kids, is like, you know, as adults too, I have to remind myself of this, that, you know, the things that are healthy, and it's all going to look a little bit different. We talk a lot about this with my daughter, because with classical homocystinuria, it's diet controlled, and she gets really upset that I don't have to eat the same things as her, but we're requiring her to eat some of these things. And it's just like, you know, what's good for you is good for you, and what's good for me is good for me. And I even think as parents, we have to like take that step back too and be like, you know, what works for some families, that's great for them, but this is our family and our own unique situation, and these are our kids, and this is what they're capable of, and this is what makes them happy, and it's not going to be the same family to family. And so I think, you know, if that is what works for you, and you know, that also probably got him to hold his head up like longer to actually look. And so, you know, there's other benefits there too, because otherwise, if you didn't have something to engage him, you know, you might not be holding his head up. And, you know, again, that's a thing to celebrate, is, you know, at least he had the muscle tone to do that. And so you just, you know, and then you just push him and challenge him a little bit more. And, you know, and it sounds like you are, and that's great. You've advanced his therapy on your own. So
Also, he now drives his own progress. Like he sees the one thing that is within his grasp that I didn't realize was, and then suddenly it's in his grasp, because he has finally, you know, pulled himself up to enough of a kneel or a stand to grab that item, and all of a sudden he's trying to pull my husband's PS4 out of the entertainment center.
that's great though.
That sounds a lot like when I was like younger, like because I obviously couldn't walk till like I was like later, but like so I was in one of those like walkers that are illegal now, that had wheels on them.
I have mine from when I was little. My mom gave it to me. I know exactly what you're
But
talking
anyways, my mom was like, said to my dad, you know, like Sam's gonna is gonna get that phone one day, meaning those really ancient cell phones that are really big. Sam is gonna get that phone one day. Well, sure enough, one day it was in my reach and I grabbed it and I threw it in the toilet.
That's
Sorry.
yeah. But you know what, it's like those things though, like as upset as you get, it's also, you know, that's something that they probably didn't expect, and he probably didn't expect it, which is probably why he left it out, you know, and then next thing you know, it's in the toilet.
Yeah, my dad was mad over that. My mom had to put it in rice.
I want to go over to you, Sam, because I know you had mentioned that you had some regression and then you had difficulties learning. Did you have it? I'm assuming that continued through school. I know that also because of your patient story that's on our website. And I know, did you have accommodations in school, or did you find coping mechanisms yourself to help you overcome some of those obstacles and challenges that came with it?
So I know through school, I had a hard time reading, so I could not read. Basically, I could not read to save my life. I can read now. It's not the best, but I can read. But I used to get, so I do have an IEP plan. That's what it's called in Canada.
That's what we have here too in the US.
And then so basically the support worker that I was with, she would basically read things for me, and she would read the answers for me. And then if I could, I would write everything down. And then she would just go and be like, hey, what does this say? Or if it came to a test or something, because sometimes I had to do tests, she'd be like, hey, what do you want to say? And she would write it down.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing, is, you know, making sure that H2 Network America, we do have a special educator's guide for the homocystinuria is on our website that I I think it was the Cobalamin steering committee actually put together, and it's a wonderful guide, because I think one of the things that we find with so many of the patients, you know, we have early intervention now, which if your child is exhibiting issues when they're young, I highly encourage you to get them into speech therapy and physical therapy and occupational therapy. Get them into all the therapies that you possibly can, because they do make a huge significant difference. But when they get into the, well, here it's the K-12 school system, you know, that they have that IEP that puts those accommodations in place. And really, I mean, fight to have all the things that you can, because your child is going to benefit from them. And, you know, the school, they're there for a significant part of their day. And so you want them to be able to excel at everything that they possibly can. We want to equip our kids for the best possible outcomes. I'm going to wrap this up here, but I wanted to see if Heather or Sam or Grace, is there anything that you think we should quickly touch on here, or advice that you would give to other patients or parents who are having, you know, I don't want to say issues, that's not the right word, but, you know, who are struggling with any of these areas?
So I know for me, like, oh,
No, you go.
okay. Okay, so I know for me, like when I was younger, I mean, you guys may not be able to experience this yet, but like, so when you get into the school systems and stuff, like it is hard. I will tell you that from being like a patient that has homocystinuria. It is hard and it's not easy. And the teachers will like question and say like, can you eat this? And can you not eat this? How come you can't participate in gym? And they think it's a joke. Well, I can't participate in gym because it affects my eyes. And it honestly is not like the best thing for me. And then you have like, so it's good because like in my elementary school, they had like a thing, a dietary list of things I could and couldn't have. And like, so some like my classmates obviously seen it one day and they're like, oh, well, how come you have this? You have no allergies. I said, I don't know. I'll have to ask my mom about that because I don't think I have any allergies either.
Yeah.
And then we had to talk. Yeah, you have homocystinuria and you can't eat this and you only have so much protein. So she tried to basically not say anything, like bring me up as if I was like a normal child, but obviously I wasn't.
Yeah. I know I think it's hard regardless of it, you know, regardless if it's Cobalamin G, MTHFR, or classical homocystinuria, it's hard to find a way to have that discussion with your child where they don't feel like the odd duck out. But I think it's also important that they know what they have. And, you know, obviously, I think as parents, we want to empower our children, but also knowing like how much is enough information for them. Obviously, when they're 2, it's, you know, it's very different than when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. And so, you know, it's finding that balance of what how much information is appropriate and that they can actually process. Because I mean, I still feel like as an adult, we're still, you know, trying to wrap our heads around this because there's so much to it. We definitely don't want them to feel that level of overwhelmed that we can sometimes feel. Grace, I know you were about to say something.
Yeah, so just you know, talking to new families or anybody, like it's learning of the diagnosis, it's hard. You know, you kind of have to go through this grieving process. It is difficult. What's helped me is talking to other people going through similar situations. You know, it's hard to wrap your head around just how rare it is you start feeling so small that there's not very many people who truly know what you're going through. I'm fortunate that Carson is doing quite well, but there's still all of that unknown. Like, yes, she's doing well right now, but realistically, her homocystine's not below 60. It probably won't ever be below 60 with current treatments. Long term, how is that going to affect her? I don't know. So, I have to stop myself from thinking about that. Like, she's doing well right now, but will it start targeting something over time? And, it's hard, but eventually, it's going to be okay. You always find this way to get through it, find somebody to lean on. And the HCU Network America, the community, has helped so much, even if it's not the exact diagnosis as you or your child has. We all have similar experiences. Going to the conference, talking to different people. I was the only family with MTHFR, but so many other families had similar experiences. It's kind of comforting. Feeling having that additional support.
Yeah. I think we all need support, and we need community, people who understand, because I think that's the hard thing is with any rare disease and any condition, if you don't have the appropriate support system in place, it's already isolating, but it's that much more isolating. And it's very hard to feel any level of hope when you don't have someone on the outside to kind of be like, okay, they've been through this, it will be okay. And it's not going to look the same across the board. It's not, but there are those shared experiences that definitely help get us through. I know it made a huge difference for me. Finally, I was pre-Facebook, so it was like Yahoo forums. There was one for Homocystinuria. Some first person was in Brazil, and there was another mom with a daughter in the UK. But we all need support, and that was my first support. It's like just knowing that I wasn't alone was enough. I was 12 though, so it was like when AOL was the internet, so very, very long time ago. I'm going to date myself here. Heather, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and like I said, I could talk for hours on this.
Yeah, I think that is so much of all of us, because our experiences, they're really, once you do get into a comfortable point, I think they are so important to share. It's good for us to be able to kind of offload those experiences, not to say like they're going to go away, but just to express them, but it also gives others that feeling that they're not alone in this journey, because it can be very overwhelming. I remember what it was like in the beginning, and there was not really great bedside manner when we were diagnosed too, so that didn't help the situation. But I appreciate your time, Heather, Sam, Grace. Sorry, I'm going like in my little circle here, for your time this evening and hanging around extra late here. But I feel like it was such a rich conversation, and so many experiences to be shared. And I hope others will go to the platform homocystinuria.rarex, it's rare-x.org, and enroll and join us in sharing your experiences. And I'm really excited for this challenge that RareX is doing, because it could have a huge effect in homocystinuria. I don't think that the central nervous system things get as much focus. It was funny because I was looking at our brochure even, and it's outdated now, but it talks about eyes, and we I think we all hear about the same things over and over and over. But what I think this conversation really brought to light is, how much more diverse our experiences are than, you know, what the literature kind of hones in on and focuses on. And so it's, I think, really important that we can get more people enrolled and to participate, because we're not going to be able to have that understanding of what is happening to patients at different points in times, and, you know, what treatments are working and not working. It looks at all of that. So if you haven't enrolled, I ask that you please do. If you have a genetic report, to please upload it. And if after you do the health and development survey, if the either behavior or the central nervous system and brain ones pop up, please take those. Pretty much anything that's going to connect back to your brain. Please do, just so that way we have that. And then if you have the ocular one in your dashboard, please complete that too, so Dr. Chapman can pull those for the updated version of the guidelines. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.